Happiness is not something you have to find with age, but is something that must be worked for to achieve. Oh. My name is Samantha Eastman, and in this talk, I will explain why this is the truth and how happiness can be achieved. There are two pieces to my senior project, the first of which was interviewing the elderly about multiple aspects of their lives, and the second was writing a book about these experiences. In the end, this became a 174-page book about 3 different people. The illustrations that are painted for the book are actually throughout the slideshow. The first interview that I had surprised me because the first and most prominent feature of the person was happiness. When I asked her, "How was your childhood?" she answered, "Oh, my childhood was fantastic." This was even in 1929, which was the year of the stock market crash and which led to the Great Depression. She also had an alcoholic father and a mother who was unable to take care of her. When I pointed this out, she said, "I have had to work for happiness all of my life, but there is no point in working for anything if you don't first have that." This is a graph showing the relationship between happiness and age. It's called the U-curve, and it's something that I learned very early in my research. So, as you can see, it shows that in the first couple of decades of your life, the happiness that you feel is very high. However, it drops down in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, and then in your 60s, it begins to rise again until the end of your life. First, I'd like to say that this is not claiming that all 40, 50, and 60-year-olds are unhappy. It's just particularly less happy than the beginning and end of your life. Andrew Oswald once said, "Individuals learn to adapt to their strengths and weaknesses and disregard their unreasonable aspirations." This really stood out to me because it suggests that if we can adapt to our strengths and weaknesses, we can find joy. From what I saw from my interviews, this was very accurate. A writer who calls themselves Lawful Rebel said, "The important thing to know about happiness is that it's not a primary, it is the result of something. It's an effect. You cannot reach for an effect in disregard of its cause and expect favorable results. In order to find happiness, you have to reach for it because it won't simply fall into your lap." There are many ideas as to how to reach for happiness. One I like most is from a fantasy novel called Game of Thrones. This says, "Never forget what you are, because surely the world will not. Arm yourself in it, and it will never be used to hurt you." This has been said in many different ways, in many times, and this is my favorite because it's most inspiring and very clear. It says, "Make your greatest weakness an even greater strength." In the 50s and 60s, the people that I interviewed tended to start having children. This was in their early 20s, which was regular for the time. This was also the case for the character that I called Amina. She stated that the happiest time of her life was when she agreed to act as a mother to her fiancé's child, who he had had with another woman who had died. She always accepted things. This was in her early life all the way to her adulthood. But she didn't only accept this, she took it over wholeheartedly and raised her as her own child. Making this decision defined the next decades of her life, but did not create her happiness. She did this by choosing to find happiness in everything in her life. Each person that I interviewed found happiness in different ways. One was through becoming a seamstress late in her 60s. Another was in taking things apart from clocks to airplanes and then putting them back together. This really showed me that happiness isn't found in the same way for everyone. It's something that has to be found alone. One of the characters in my novel's name was Peter. In Poland, they would call him Piotr, which is where he was born. However, he moved to the US at a very young age and grew up in the Great Depression. In the 1940s, World War II began and he became a teenager. At that time, he went to Dartmouth to find education as becoming a pilot. 3 months into that education, the entire funding for the program fell through. So he was forced to go to a farm where he was learning to fly planes from a crop duster pilot who had no war experience. This was difficult for him, but he found his wife at that farm. He then married her for 7 years, and they adopted 2 children from China, They adopted 2 children from China, and then after the 7 years of marriage, the wife had an affair which led to their divorce. Because of the times, it wasn't shown that the relationship between a father and a child was as important as a child and its mother, so he lost custody. After this, he spent the rest of his life without marrying again and having very little contact with his children, who struggled and then eventually found themselves having their own children and getting their lives back together. When he moved into a nursing facility, he actually found a woman who he's still with today. This sounds like a very sad story when you put it together like this, but it really isn't. I'd like to compare this to a cake. If you eat a cup of flour, a cup of cocoa powder, or vanilla, it's not going to be very good, and it's probably going to make you ill. However, when they're put together, you get something really wonderful. Hjolfr's life was actually very happy overall. Even though picked apart, it sounds very difficult and majorly unhappy. You have to put work into everything that you want. Here's the thing. As a society, we're afraid of aging. Therefore, we cast aside our elderly. We put people in nursing homes, and we tend to stop talking to the elderly around us. As you can see from the U-curve, this doesn't keep the elderly from finding happiness. However, it does hinder our happiness, because if we can't find a time to talk to and observe the people who are the happiest age category, how can we be expected to find that happiness ourselves? So what I ask is, the next time that you go to a nursing home, or you see an elderly couple at a restaurant together, don't think to yourself that they're sad, lonely, or even cute. Think that they're people who have a lot of knowledge stored up in their minds that can help you. I don't bring up the U-curve as a way of saying, wait 40 years and happiness will eventually find you. I bring it up for exactly the opposite purpose. There is a reason behind this happiness that doesn't have to be found in your 80s. When you know the reasons behind somebody else's happiness, you can work for those things yourself. A final thought to leave you with is, you get out of life what you put into it. If you desire happiness, you have to reach for it. And these are my works I did. That is all, but I did want to say before I leave that I wanted to thank Sarah Thissell for reading and editing my book, because I gave her very short notice and it was really appreciative. And thank you, that's all. Are there any questions?
Oh, it's like the Game of Thrones quote. Was that from Littlefinger or no?
No, it was actually from Lord Tyrion. Sorry about that.
Oh.